A blessed and a wonderful Sunday to everyone. Today, I will be introducing to you a new series entitled The Two Epochs, the last days of the Lord and the last days of the world. The two epochs, or the two period, time frame. The last days of the Lord and the last days of the world. Now, what do we mean by this series? I found out that in our study in the book of Matthew, towards the end of this book, looking at the last days of the Lord Jesus Christ towards His passion before His death and resurrection and ascension, I noticed important matters. The closer His death during that time, He began mentioning about a title that He claimed to be, and the frequency of mentioning of this title became really high and often. What was the title that He kept on mentioning about Himself? The title Son of Man. Okay? Take note of that title, Son of Man. It is considered to be even more weightier, not more weightier, but weightier than the title Son of God when you think of the divinity of Jesus Christ. Many people in the olden days take the title Son of God. Hindi lang si Kibuloy ngayon ang nagka-carry ng title na ganon. In the olden days, people who belong to royal family, they carried the title calling themselves as sons of God as well. So it was like a common title that many people would carry. A victor from a great war would go back home and would be addressed as a son of God as well. So the Son of God was a common title that was used by many back then. But the title Son of Man, that title Son of Man, may be perceived with a lesser connotation on the deity of Christ today, but actually in the real sense in the olden days during the time of Jesus, that title Son of Man has a weightier understanding about the divinity of Jesus. Why is that so? Because that title, Son of Man, can be traced back to Daniel chapter 7, wherein Daniel, as a prophet of God that time, saw a vision. And he said in that vision that he saw that there was a Son of Man, like a Son of Man, that is coming on the clouds. And the Son of Man is going to reign forever. And that this Son of Man is going to be the figure of worship that the kings all over the world, every person from the different tribes and tongues would bow down to Him. And this Son of Man will reign for eternity. That Son of Man is the figure of the Messiah as prophesied by Daniel. When Jesus used the title Son of Man pertaining to Himself, He was making a claim that I am not just an ordinary person. I am not just a prophet, but I am the anointed one. I am the Messiah. I am the one who is to come and who is going to reign forever. So Jesus, He claimed that title pertaining to Himself. And I observed that the closer His death was, the more frequent He used this idea. And that idea of a Son of Man, when you look at how Daniel prophesied about that matter, it pertained to the end times. It pertained to the end of days. It pertained to a time that is closer to the judgment day, that the world will come to its end. It pertained to that event. So the closer the death of Jesus was, the more frequent He used this title. Second, why would we connect the last days of Jesus to the last days of the world? We connect it because when you look at the last chapters of Matthew, He dedicated two lengthy chapters to talk about the end times. Now, here is what I discovered. The events that took place nearing the death of Jesus would teach us some events as well that we will expect to happen in the last days. Okay, I'll repeat. The events that Jesus experienced towards the last days, towards his death, were teaching us events as well that will happen in the end times. And in particular, this time, our sermon title is called, When the World is Awry, God Shall Be the Ultimate Authority. When the world is awry, dili aray ha, awry. Some may pronounce this as Awry, A-W-R-Y. But the pronunciation of that word is awry. When the world is awry, meaning it is out of order, it is twisted, it is out of the course that God intended for it to experience. When it is going away from God's design, when the world is awry, God shall be the ultimate authority. Why? As Jesus was nearing his death, he experienced this reality that looking at the temple and Jerusalem and Israel, the people were living in a manner that was misguided. They were in that condition, as I mentioned, awry. And then Jesus dealt with the matter. And as we look at the last days of Jesus, having the society in that condition, in the last days, before Jesus comes back again, the world is going to be in that situation as well. Out of order. It is out of track, out of the course that God intended to be. That's why the judgment, the final judgment will come. So let's meditate on this based on Matthew 21, 1 to 17. Matthew 21, 1 to 17. When they had approached Jerusalem and had come to Bethphage at the Mount of Olives, then Jesus sent two disciples, saying to them, Go into the village opposite you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied there and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, you shall say, The Lord has need of them, and immediately he will send them. This took place to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet. Say to the daughter of Zion, Behold, your king is coming to you, gentle and mounted on a donkey, even on a colt, the foal of a beast of burden. The disciples went and did just as Jesus had instructed them, and brought the donkey and the colt and laid their coats on them. And he sat on the coats. Most of the crowd spread their coats in the road, and others were cutting branches from the trees and spreading them in the road. The crowds going ahead of him and those who followed were shouting, Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. When he had entered Jerusalem, all the city was stirred, saying, Who is this? And the crowds were saying, This is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth in Galilee. And Jesus entered the temple and drove out all those who were buying and selling in the temple, and overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who were selling doves. And he said to them, It is written, My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you are making it a robber's den. And the blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he healed them. But when the chief priests and the scribes saw the wonderful things that he had done, and the children who were shouting in the temple, Hosanna to the Son of David, they became indignant. And he said to him, Do you hear what these children are saying? And Jesus said to them, Yes. Have you never read, Out of the mouth of infants and nursing babies, you have prepared praise for yourself? And he left them and went out of the city to Bethany and spent the night there. May the good Lord bless the reading of his word. Here is something that I have observed in our society and even in our respective homes. Every problem we encounter in life would lead us to an authority. Why did I say that? I'll repeat. Every problem, every issue, every burden that we face in life would lead us to an authority. Why did I say that? For example, your son, your daughter, who happened to be a very young child, keeps on eating candies. And then one day, he or she complains, My tooth is aching. That's a problem, right? That's a problem. When a child's tooth aches, that's a big problem. That kind of problem would lead you to an authority. To whom shall you go? We will bring our children to the dentist. Why will we bring our child to the dentist? Because the dentist is whom we recognize as authority in dealing with that problem. If your problem had to do with your gripo in your house, there is no water that comes out of the faucet, and yet you check your neighbors, all of them had, and then you check that there is a problem with the bulb. And so, whom shall you call? It would lead you to an authority on that matter. You will go and find a plumber. A plumber is somebody whom you recognize who has the capacity to fix the issue. It's like that always. When a Bible student can't make sense with a passage that he is reading, to whom shall he go? He will go to the professor. Why? Because the professor is his perceived authority that could help him interpret the text. If the couple cannot or does not get along with each other, they may seek a help of a counselor. Why? Because the counselor is an authority that they may recognize that would be able to help them. If you have a problem with your car because your car's engine doesn't start, then you acknowledge the authority of a technician, not a technician, but a mechanic, or at the same time, an electrician of vehicles, of the automotives. So the kind of problem that we have in life, the kind of issues and burdens that we face will point us to an authority that we may recognize to help us. Now, here's the thing. When we look at our society, there is a kind of problem that no human beings could help. It is so discouraging to think about our society today morally. It's so low. It went down drastically. Corruption is everywhere. And the hardship that the society is experiencing, it couldn't be addressed even by the greatest politician. So listen very carefully. The election is fast approaching. As it comes, we will vote wisely. But listen, do not expect that the politician running will solve the issues in the society totally. They may help alleviate our condition a little. They may address some issues in life, but not everything. Because reality is this. The society where we live today is a fallen society. The society that we dwell in today is a society that is immersed in the issues of sin that only God can resolve. That is why if you search for an ultimate answer to the problem of our society today, the politicians are never the ultimate answers to it. While we vote wisely and expect that good things may happen in the coming days, let's not put our hope in them. Let's recognize the greatest authority that we need in this life. Now, in the text that we read, Jesus was introduced as someone with authority. Why did I say that? Now, listen very carefully to the earlier parts of this section, because what we would see here is Jesus telling his disciples, you go and get this donkey because I am in need of them. That fact that Jesus was telling his disciples, you go, he was commanding them, immediately there is a sense of authority that he was asserting to his disciples. And then a prophecy was quoted that your king, pertaining to Jesus, will be going to Jerusalem and will be using and riding on a donkey. Take note of the title king attributed to Jesus. That title would mean as well an authority. The greatest authority that one may see within the land that operates within the concept of theocratic form of governance, then the highest authority, or not theocratic but monarchical form of governance, the highest authority is the king. And Jesus was introduced to be the king of Israel. If you look at that matter, then there is a claim that he is the highest authority. Another thing that we need to look into that asserts about the authority of Jesus, as the text tells us, that he rode a donkey going to Jerusalem. While that image is often described as an act of humility and gentleness of the Lord, because he rode a donkey instead of riding on a horse. Some scholars would say that it speaks of his humility and gentleness. Well, that's correct as well. But don't you know that riding on a donkey is a peculiar act that kings did in the Old Testament? David, when you read 1 and 2 Samuel, David had his own donkey that only him rides. David used a donkey as he moved around his kingdom. Solomon as well, when he was brought to Jerusalem to be anointed and be declared as king, you know what he was riding on? He was riding on a donkey. So a donkey, while it represents gentleness, meekness, and humility of somebody who is great, it actually relates the idea that when Jesus enters Jerusalem and he's riding on a donkey, here comes a king just like David and Solomon in the Old Testament. So while it is an act of humility and gentleness, there is a claim of supremacy as far as authority is concerned that Jesus has, because he is introduced publicly as the king over Israel. So that's how he was introduced. Jesus rode a donkey, and then people were lining up, they were going ahead, and they attributed to him a title again that was superior in terms of authority, because people, especially the young ones, uttered this line to him: Hosanna in the highest. Here is someone who comes, who is addressed as the Son of David. That title is so important. Why? Why is the Son of David so important? As important as the Son of Man, as declared by Daniel in Daniel chapter 7. The idea of the Son of David is so important. It is a messianic title. When I say a messianic title, it goes back to the time when God spoke to David, and God said to David, David, a time will come that I will raise a king from your line. A king who is going to reign forever. His kingdom will not come to an end. His kingdom will be forever. And as he reigns forever, that means to say your line will not come to an end as well as a king. It goes on for eternity. And what God was talking about, he was talking about the suffering Messiah. He's talking about the coming of the Anointed One. And when the people, especially the younger generation who were following the parade as Jesus entered Jerusalem, as they saw him, they said, Hosanna in the highest, here is a guy who is called to be the Son of David. Meaning, he is the Messiah. They are declaring him to be the Messiah. That's another title that carries a very weighty idea of authority. You see how Jesus was packed with the concept of authority as he entered Jerusalem. And when he got into the inner part of Jerusalem, Jesus went directly to the temple. And you know what he did in the temple? He did a crazy thing. When he got into the temple, he saw an anomaly. When he got into the temple, he saw something that a king shall never see. When he got into the temple, somebody who is God shall not see it because it is inappropriate with his presence. What did he see when he got inside the temple? He saw something that is twisted. He saw corruption. Why? Inside the temple, there were money changers. There were sellers of dove. Animals were all around. There were business transactions that were taking place, and many of them were dishonest. If you look at that scenario was inappropriate for a king who is not just a human king, but a divine king. And you know what he did? Jesus asserted his authority when he got inside the temple. What did he do? Well, verse 12 would show to us something that he did. He did something. He drove out those who were buying and selling. He went inside and he drove them away. Go out! Go out! Those who were buying and selling, those who were transacting businesses inside the temple, he drove them away. Why is that an authority? If you go inside such a place and you don't have an inherent authority, you cannot do what he did. You don't just get inside a classroom and tell the teacher and the students, you go out, if you don't have an inherent authority. What he did was an assertion of authority. He asserted his authority because the temple was not functioning the way he wanted it to function. He asserted his authority because the temple was infested by twisted mind. Spirituality is not seen there. Instead, a very bankrupt heart of the people are displayed in every transaction that they did. You imagine Jesus felt that betrayal. Jesus felt the disappointment. And when that temple is in that kind of condition, a condition which I mentioned to you a little while ago, awry, it is not in the expected course. It is twisted because the blind guides were there. And that is why Jesus had to assert his authority by driving away those who were buying and selling. Added to that, in the same verse, Jesus asserted his authority again. What did he do? He overturned the tables of the money changers. You don't just get inside that area of the temple and turn the tables upside down if you don't have the authority, right? Another thing that he did, you look at verse 12c. He overturned the seats of those who were selling doves. Literally, he asserted his authority over everyone inside the temple. And then you look at verse 13. What did he say? This is what he said. My house shall be called a house of prayer. Take note of that statement, my house. He wasn't only asserting authority over the entire Israel as he came in presenting himself the way Solomon and David were presented in the Old Testament as kings over Israel. But now he called the temple my house. That's an assertion of authority of Jesus Christ over the temple and over everyone who was inside the temple. If he did not have an inherent authority over the temple, anybody could accuse him in Bisaya, nangangkunay. But he could not be accused with that. Why? Because he had the authority over it, as he mentioned it, because he's not an ordinary man. He is a deity. He is God embodied in a form of a flesh that we may experience salvation. He is the owner of the temple. And then added to that, you look at verse 14. There is something like we could consider as an insertion here. Sometimes we would ask, why did the author include this? When in fact it does not have a very smooth connection with what is happening around. Look at verse 14. What do you see? The blind and the lame went to him and he healed them. Wait a minute. He turned the tables upside down. He asserted his authority by driving the people who were buying and selling out of the temple. He turned the seats of the sellers of doves. He claimed the house of God to be his house. Those were assertion of authority. Why is there an insertion now of healing? What does it have to do with the assertion of his authority? Well, the healing incidents also are assertion of his authority over ailments or sickness of everyone who is in the temple. Those details were placed by the author because every part of it is intertwined to each other. That even the healing by itself is an assertion of the authority of Jesus over sicknesses, over issues that they went through. And then, when that took place, the people continued to shout, "Hosanna to the Son of David." Now, here comes the religious leaders. Here comes the priest of the temple. Here comes the elders of Israel. And they confronted Jesus. Why did they have to do that? Because they were the perceived authorities of the temple. They were like the guards of the temple, and they themselves recognized that they have their own authority over the temple and over the people inside the temple. And as they perceived themselves to be that way, they went to confront Jesus. But I am surprised with the basis of their confrontation. Why? Look at verse 15. When you look at verse 15, it is a natural reaction, supposedly, if they reacted when Jesus drove out the people. If they reacted and responded to him as he turned the tables upside down and the chairs upside down. It was a natural reaction and response that they would be indignant about him if they would respond to him questioning his authority because he claimed the temple to be his house. It's a natural reaction and response for those people who perceive themselves to be authority of the temple. But listen, that wasn't the basis of their reaction. When you look at verse 15, surprisingly, they were indignant when they saw the wonderful things Jesus did. How in the world that they are reacting now, not because of what he did earlier, that he drove out the people, he turned the tables and the seats upside down, he claimed the temple to be his house. Why were they reacting and responding to the wonderful things that Jesus did? What is these wonderful things? The healing that he performed. Why were they reacting to it? Because as Jesus healed, the people went to him. And as they went to him, they experienced the glory of God. And as they experienced more and more what Jesus can do, they began to recognize all the more his authority over their lives. And when the religious authorities saw this, they are recognizing the authority of Jesus. What about our authority? If they responded to the authority of Jesus, na paano na lang kami? That's what they felt. No wonder they responded, they reacted with that indignance when they heard the children shout to Jesus, "Hosanna to the Son of David." Why? Because as these children were shouting at him, "Hosanna to the Son of David," they are saying, "Here comes the Messiah." And we recognize his authority. And in that same sense, when they heard that, they are saying, yeah, they recognize his authority. What about our authority? They were jealous of what the people attributed to Jesus. And that's something, a great failure that the religious leaders did not see. Why? Because Jesus, when he discovered that something wrong that was going on in the temple, he asserted his authority because it was his way of giving them the chance to have a reform within the temple. If they just recognized the authority of Jesus, they could have done things in a way that is different, that became like a norm in the past, that they now may renew the beauty of the temple if they just recognize the authority of Jesus. If they recognized the authority of Jesus, they could have told him, "Lord, we are so sorry about what we did. We led the people astray. Now we are repenting." That was an opportunity for them to change, to experience the effect of the authority of God. But they did not seize it. Instead, they stood on their ground and they questioned the authority of Jesus. because they were jealous of him. And that reality is so much applicable in the lives of the people in our time today. You know what? Here is something that I realized as these religious leaders responded to him. When Jesus sees that something is wrong in the society, in a family, in the life of a person, when he sees something is wrong, he comes and asserts his authority. When Jesus asserts his authority, it is an opportunity for the person, for a family, for a society to experience change, to be reformed into the image of God, to be conformed into the image of God, to be reformed in the will of God. And yet when one rejects the authority of Jesus and follows his own authority, then that person will never experience the effect of the authority of Christ. That person will never experience the beauty of being submissive to the authority of Christ. And that's a reality that one may experience. That is why when we go to a doctor, there is a recognition of the authority of the doctor. That's why we go to the doctor. And the doctor would prescribe medicines. And sometimes, even if the doctor told us already, you take it for 3 times a day within 7 days. You know, Filipinos, we think and we evaluate ourselves and we say, okay naman ko. Di na lang siguro kung magpadayon anis, 2 days pa lang. So the doctor prescribed, take this antibiotic for 7 days so that the problem will not recur. But the Pinoy bought the medicines from the pharmacy and then only for 2 days because he will observe himself. And so he took the medicines for 2 days. He finds himself a bit fine. Maybe I need to add 1 more day. So he added 3 more medicines, took them for another day. And then the 4th day, he's fine. Forget about the rest of the days as prescribed by the doctor. Ang problema, pagka 5th day, nibalik. If the doctor could only tell you, mirisi, kay gahi man kag ulo. Usually, that's what happens. Even if we acknowledge the doctor's authority, and yet when we don't follow what is prescribed, the possibility is that we are bringing problems to ourselves as well. When Jesus asserts his authority, you do this, it is the obedience of his children that would help us experience the effects of his authority. It is the obedience. The authority of Christ is there. He asserts that. When you have a problem with your spouse, you don't talk with each other for 2 weeks already, and then you come to the Lord and say, Lord, you are the authority of my life. As a husband, the Lord illumined your mind, asserted his authority that you have to follow his word. As the leader of the home, as someone who is given the task to love your spouse, you are to forgive her and to go to her first and ask for forgiveness. And then you say, sakit man, Lord, lisod kayo, dili sa ako. Then you don't follow what God is saying. Then you don't experience the peace of the home. It is in obedience that we are able to respond to God and allow ourselves to experience the authority of Jesus and the effects of it. When Jesus Christ came to the temple, he asserted his authority. The religious leaders were supposed to recognize that authority and bring reformation within the temple and function as God wanted it to function. The problem was they rejected his authority because they have a perceived authority of their own. And that's exactly what happens even to every believer. If we reject what God gives to us when he asserts his authority because we want to stand on our own ground and tell, I am the captain of my life, I have the authority over myself. When we respond to the authority of Jesus in that way, you and I will not experience what we desire to experience. Our lives, our family, our society will remain to be in that condition. Awry. Aray ang experience. Why? Because we don't recognize and take the full authority of Christ and submit to it day after day. When we go to Him, Lord, help me because my job is not really well right now. I am not sure whether I would stay here for so long. Lord, help me. When Christ would tell us, deal with matters honestly. Be faithful to me. Even when your workmates are not faithful to me, be faithful. And as a believer, when we find it hard to do that, continue doing it still. Why? Because He is the full authority of our lives. And we want to experience the fullness of His authority and the greatness of His blessing. It will come. It will come when we all recognize the full authority of Jesus. And that full authority, the recognition that we would give to it, would be exemplified in our full obedience to His authority. Because Jesus would come and assert His authority if He finds that our lives are in awry. When we recognize His authority, we give Him the chance. We give Him the chance to make our lives whole again. This society would break our lives in reality. You have your own worldview because you follow the biblical truth. You go to your workplace, you'll encounter people who have different worldviews from you. When you encounter with them, their behavior is different. The way they do things is different. You will be bruised. You will be wounded because of your faith. And then what happens is that we are broken into pieces. It is only when we submit to the full authority of Christ that we give Him the chance to break, not to break, but to pick up the broken pieces and make us whole again. It is only when we submit to the full authority of Christ. Listen very carefully. Jesus is the supreme authority in whom we shall abide amidst an awry society. What happened in the last days of Jesus will certainly happen in the last days of the world. The end times is near. When it takes place, you would observe that the more and more the society where we live will be in that condition. It is disoriented. It is in chaos. It is not doing as God wanted it to work. Why? Well, the end times is going to happen. And Jesus would keep on asserting His authority. And only those who would recognize it will experience His work and His power and His grace. Let Christ's authority take full control of your life, of your family, and of your home, alongside your children and your spouse. When you allow Christ's authority to take full control, you will be made whole again. God bless you and good morning.